Brothers and sisters, it was not my intention to mislead you last week, to pull a bait and switch, when I predicted that I'd be posting some questions for Christians for this week's Sunday school lesson. I was midway through that very project, in fact, when I got a little high and, seeking entertainment, made the mistake of re-watching that whacking video that Kent Hovind published a few weeks ago, and I swear it was even funnier than I'd remembered. And it seemed a shame to me for such a promising exchange to just fizzle out simply because I refused to compromise my principles. So I figure, what the hell, I'll answer his silly-ass questions so that I can engage him for a while longer. If you've kind of jumped into this mighty current of events in midstream and don't know the background for what I'm talking about here, I think it would be worth your while to watch the videos that precede this one in my Hovind playlist. Kent's whackery centered around a sadly misguided attempt to respond to my preliminary question in exhaustive detail, as if the various items I mentioned in fleshing out that question were the questions I had indicated he wouldn't be able to answer. Of course, I knew his answers to the question or questions that I asked, and I already knew his cockeyed justification for his answers and didn't need a refresher course. I just wanted to hear him affirm that he does believe that stupid shit, and for him to hear himself saying it, so that I could proceed in good faith with the questions that he can't answer. I guess a lifetime of lying will rot a person's brain. This soul-winning preacher man sure has missed the point of everything so far. Anyway, Kent left me a couple of comments on my Sunday school lesson from 2 weeks ago, the one where I responded to his public whack job. In one of them, he indicated that I had asked him 3 questions out of the blue and that he had answered all 3 completely. I'll give him that. Exhaustively would have been a better choice of adverb. I'm going to review those supposed 3 questions in a minute. He's also let it be known that he's asked me 3 questions in turn that he'd like answered, and told me that he won't continue this exchange until I do. Until I do. Now, hope springs eternal, so I hope I'm not misunderstanding what he's said here, that if I do answer his cockamamie questions, he'll continue the exchange. That would be excellent. That would make it my turn to ask the next question, and it will be the question I wanted to confront him with in the first place, a question that he damn well cannot answer. Since it would be easy to misread my motives, I'll say a few words about them. I hope it's obvious that I hate lies and that I hold liars in the contempt they deserve. A lot of what I do is intended to correct bad information, to tackle bad ideas. That's one of the things that educators do. Another thing that at least most educators know is that liars are, after all, human beings, just like every other category of humans you can name, and merit at least the minimum consideration that we'd give to any other category of human. Over the years, I've asked a number of Christians if they do the really Christ-like thing and pray for Satan on a regular basis. I've never run into a single one who does, but in a sense, that's what I'm doing here. I don't want to write Kent Hovind off as a lost soul the way he does others. He's another human being caught up in the mill of life, just like I am. He swallowed some lies during his childhood, just like I did. The difference between us is that he's gotten so comfortable with those lies over the years that it would never occur to him to try to find his way out of the intellectual manacles he's forged for himself. Moreover, he's found a way to make a little money spreading those lies. It's a tragic waste of a human life. He's not without wit and perhaps some small talent. He might be able to do a little bit of good in the world instead of pushing the kind of twaddle he pushes. I'd like to see him wise up and change his ways. Wouldn't that make the world at least a tiny bit better? What Dr. Hovind described as 3 questions asked him out of the blue is actually a single question, fleshed out in enough detail so that he could see for sure what he's committing himself to. Here's the text of the question as I framed it in the video to which he responded in front of his adoring audience just down the dirt road from Lenox, Alabama. Do you, Kent Hovind, actually believe that the entire earth was covered by water during Noah's flood to a depth of 15 cubits above the highest mountains? Do you believe that all that water arrived over the course of less than a month and a half from both subterranean and meteoric sources, and that despite the sustained battering that such a flood would give absolutely everything, somehow representatives of all living and extinct kinds, whatever the hell that is, of animals on Earth, were preserved in a wooden boat that floated on those floodwaters for at least a year? Do you believe that the descendants of those animals on that ark somehow made it back to their continents of origin from somewhere in Turkey starting about 4,400 years ago, and that all animals living on this planet are, in fact, descendants of those seafaring pairs of kinds? Of course, I already knew what his answer to this question would be, and a simple yes would have sufficed for those purposes for which I framed it. But even though I think I spelled out to him pretty clearly what this preliminary question was meant to establish, he spent his whole public whacking session focusing on the details of this question, and then, like a chess-playing pidget, crapped all over the chessboard and declared himself the winner. And of course, he asked me a gaggle of questions, which I indicated that I wasn't going to bother answering. Well, I hope I don't regret this, but since I do want a chance to dance with this world's genius a little bit more, I'm going to do what I said I wasn't going to do. I'm going to answer his questions. And in so doing, I'm going to provide a model for how he should have answered mine. Please note that my responses are to his questions as framed. If the question is badly framed, such that one part of it is false, even if part of it would have drawn an affirmative response, then my answer is no. Here's how I described the exchange that you will see in today's lesson.
Old Codger, I'm not demanding that anyone pay for my religion to be taught in public schools, so you're attempting to shift the burden of proof to me. I'll answer your questions and then ask you some questions, okay?
It took him 8 minutes to answer what he took to be my first question. That's comparable to the amount of time he spent with the others as well, and I'm not about to summarize his pseudoscientific horse shit. Here's his wrap-up of his answer and his first question to me.
So yes, Mr. Codger, I believe Noah's flood covered all the earth, 15 cubits above the highest mountains that were there at the time. Now, do you, Old Codger, actually believe that the entire universe with its septillions of stars was actually all compressed in a dot, smaller than a period?
No.
Mr. Codger, you said you were raised like I was in an independent Baptist church and you gave it all up. Did you then accept the evolution theory because of all your music training?
No.
Did they teach you came from a rock?
No.
Have you, Old Codger, given up on things clearly seen, like the creation and the flood, and become fool enough to believe evolution or the Big Bang?
Since Dr. Hovind waxed eloquent concerning logical fallacies during his whack job, I'm sure he knows what a complex question is. That's surely included in that list of fallacies he was brandishing there at Dinosaur Adventureland, isn't it? The question he just asked is a pretty good example of one. The usual textbook example is for someone to ask at a domestic abuse hearing, "Have you stopped beating your wife?" Oh, wait, come to think of it, that question might hit a little close to home where Kent is concerned. Sorry I brought that up, Kent. Anyway, I didn't become a fool by believing in evolution or the Big Bang. I shed some delusions when I understood the science behind both and accepted them for what they are, explanatory models of stunning predictive power that apparently cannot be overturned no matter how hard creationists try. I trust you understood my answer, Dr. Hovind.
You asked me a question, I answered it. Yes, I believe. You answer mine. Do you believe in the Big Bang? Do you
Yes.
believe you were compressed into a dot smaller than a period on a page?
No.
The crust subsiding into the void would flood the world, and the collapse of the ice canopy overhead. Old Codger, I answered your question. Now for you. Do you believe that all the matter in the universe expanded faster than the speed of light?
No.
All the textbooks are teaching now, the universe, the Big Bang, was faster than the speed of light. Whoa. Astronomers suspect when the cosmos was less than a second old, It went through a period of incredibly rapid expansion known as inflation. Okay. Big Bang itself expanded much faster than the speed of light.
Did you listen to what you just read? Do you pay attention to anything that you read? It was the Big Bang itself that expanded faster than the speed of light, not matter.
But this only means that nothing can go faster than light because it's going through nothing. I understand the theory. I think it's stupid. Now, old codger, do you believe all the matter in the universe expanded faster than the speed of light? I answered your first two questions. Answer mine, please.
No.
So, you reject the idea about 8,000 kinds of animals could survive a flood.
Yes.
And instead, believe the idea that all forms of life came from a single-celled creature, which came from a rock, which came from a dot of nothing exploding.
No.
That's the Big Bang Theory.
No, it isn't. Not even close.
There we have it. A dot of nothing exploded. The earth cooled down, developed a hard rocky crust. It rained on the rocks for millions of years, turned them into soup, and the soup came alive into some kind of an amoeba. And that amoeba, over millions and millions of years, slowly turned to a human. This is the evolution theory.
No, it isn't. Not even close.
Did you, after all you're believing the Bible for all those years, give up on the Bible and accept this theory instead, Mr. Codger?
It depends on what you mean by this theory. If you mean the theory of evolution by means of natural selection in the updated form known as the Neo-Darwinian synthesis, then my answer is yes. If by this theory you mean that ludicrous straw man about whales coming from an amoeba that came from a rock that came from a dot of nothing exploding, then my answer is no, of course not. Do I look like an easy mark?
Do you believe the idea that all forms of life came from a single-celled creature?
No.
Yes, I believe all forms of life came from the 8,000 pairs of animals on the ark. Now, do you believe they all came from a single-celled creature, which came from a rock, which came from a dot of nothing exploding? Answer the question, please. Okay?
No.
I'd had a common ancestor. Dog, wolf, coyote, jackal, fox. They're definitely not related to a banana. Can you tell the difference?
Yes.
See, variation within the kinds is science. Connecting them all together to a common ancestor is religion. You have to believe that an aardvark is related to a banana and a frog and an eagle. That's not science, okay? So now, old codger, you believe all animals on Earth today are in fact descendants of an amoeba, or further back, a rock.
No.
Let's start there, old codger. You asked me the question, do I believe they all came from animals off Noah's Ark? Yes, I do. I'm guessing about 8,000 or 9,000 pairs. That's all you would need to make everything we have today. So do you believe they all came from a rock?
No.
Let's see. Humans and birds are related. Do you believe you're related to a canary, old codger? Just answer the question, yes or no.
Yes.
Do you believe you're related to a canary?
Yes.
Or a frog? I'll give you your choice, okay?
Yes.
How about a reptile? Do you think you're related to a reptile?
Yes.
Or how about a ladybug?
Yes.
Or a pine tree?
Yes.
Or a worm?
Yes.
Are these all your cousins?
Yes.
They got a common ancestor. This is the charts in school. You wanted to challenge me. I didn't see your challenge from a year ago. I'm sorry about that. I hope you see mine. Somebody contact him and say, hey, Hovind answered yours. Answer his now. Do you believe humans are related to lemurs and orangutans?
Yes.
Here we go. Humans are related to a protozoa. Do you believe you came from a protozoa?
No.
Believe these family trees are correct?
Yes.
That humans and whales and aardvarks and frogs and everything, every life form came from a single-celled creature. Do you believe that?
No.
They got them all going back. The origin of life, octopus and squid and starfish and, wow, jellyfish, all related. Mary Leakey said all those trees of life with our branches of our ancestors, that's a lot of nonsense. I agree, Mary, you got it right. You are a primate. No.
Yes.
Might be one. You might classify them that way, but I'm not related to a gorilla or a gibbon or a chimpanzee or orangutan, any of them. Humans always make baby humans, no exceptions. You think you're related to an orangutan?
Yes.
Go mate with one, make a baby.
No thanks. I mean, you wouldn't deny that I'm related to all other humans, and I wouldn't dream of fucking most of them, so the prospect of shagging an orangutan just isn't all that appealing to me. Curious that you brought it up, though, Kent. Have you been having naughty thoughts, brother? About your fellow apes? I have to admit they seem pretty lively.
We never see cows produce non-cows. Never. Do you believe cows came from an amoeba?
No.
They draw trees of life. Do you believe animals, fungi, and plants are related?
Yes.
You think you're related to a pine tree, old codger?
Yes.
See, the science is outside that circle. The religion is inside. All the many forms of life today are descended from a common ancestor. Wow. A primitive unicellular organism. You believe you came from an amoeba?
No.
You want to give up on the Bible, God's word, which you said you used to believe. You say you gave up on that, and now you're smarter. You believe you're related to a worm, Mr. Codger?
Yes.
This one has humans, birds, and crocodiles, and all related to a common ancestor. This is religion. This is not science. They draw these lines on paper, connecting them all. So I got some questions you can't answer. You told me. I think I answered them.
No, you didn't. I haven't asked those questions yet, so you certainly haven't answered them. You instead wasted a hell of a lot of time poring over preliminary questions. If you'd been paying any attention, you'd have known that that's what they were. I knew that you could answer those points. I knew your justification already because I've watched your creation seminar in its entirety and didn't pay a red cent for it, and it still wasn't worth the money. I just wanted to hear you say yes when I asked you that question. Of course, you set me straight on that 40 days of rain versus 150 days of gushing subterranean waters, as if that detail affects the thrust of my question one iota. If you had even minimal comprehension skills, you'd have understood that my entire question could be reduced to a simple, do you actually believe the crazy shit you say you believe? Because the form I gave it was a more fully expressed version of that very thing. And all I needed to hear you say, and needed for you to hear you say, was yes.
Your weird beliefs. You think it's weird to believe all the animals came from 8,000 pairs on the ark, but it's not weird to believe all of them came from a rock?
Oh, believing either of those things would be hella weird. But of course I don't believe either of those things. Only a damn fool would believe either of those things.
That's weird belief. By someone who understands them as well as you do. You don't understand anything like what I do on this. You're at level 0, okay, on the understanding of the creation and the flood. You're willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood and the coming judgment of God. You said at the beginning, I do want to be fair and I don't want to accuse you of believing something you don't. You did not. I believe the Noah's Ark story. I believe the flood story is correct.
That's all I needed to hear from you, Dr. Hovind. You needn't have wasted over half an hour of your precious kingdom-building time rehashing those ludicrous models meant to confer some plausibility on your batshit beliefs. I just wanted to hear you say that you do indeed believe them and that I have not misrepresented you. If you had any integrity, you'd recognize the value in what I've done here and appreciate it.
In fact, believe. That would be your approach. No, stop it. You're lying, okay?
Oh, so you really do think that atheists believe they came from an amoeba that came from a rock that came from a dot of nothing that exploded? I thought for sure you were lying. I thought for sure that no one could possibly be that stupid.
But I'm fundamentally more honest than you. Now, there you're crazy on that one, okay? So I'll just go ahead right now and ask you the questions that I'll need an answer to before I can post my follow-ups, okay? Post your follow-ups, Mr. Codger. I'm ready for them.
Your wish is my command, Dr. Hovind. I can't tell you how much I look forward to hearing your response.
Okay, why don't you call Standing for Truth and schedule a debate? But the debate should be on what do you believe? If you don't believe the Bible is how we got here, the only other choice I've heard of is evolution. You got another theory? Or do you common evolution theory taught in the schools? But Standing for Truth is looking for more atheists to debate. The simple question is, where's the evidence for evolution? We claim there's none, zero, none at all. If you think you got some, call Standing for Truth, schedule a debate. I'd like to get about 20 more in the next 2 months.
Well, needless to say, that's not going to happen. I've already told this fool for Christ that I have no intention of debating him. Talk about a waste of time. I'm an educator. I have much higher aims in view. I intend to get this lost soul to take a look at one single question honestly, every tiniest facet of it. And if he won't do that, if he refuses to do it because of what he fears it might cost him, then I'm just going to have to let as much of the world as possible know what a coward and a slacker he is. Now, Kent, I'm going to assume that you're watching this and will acknowledge that I answered your 3 questions, or 4, or 5, or 6 dozen, or however many that was. Now it's your turn, and I will thus post my follow-up for your prayerful consideration. I won't be answering any more of your questions until you've answered this one. This is the actual question that I have for you, a question that you cannot answer, a question that would burst your whole sorry bubble if you were to give it a moment's serious, honest consideration. I want you either to attempt to answer it or to have to admit to yourself that you don't dare touch it. I've already framed exactly what I want you to address. I did it in my Sunday school lesson 2 weeks ago. I assume you saw it. I mean, if you watched my whole response to your whacking off-key in public, you have to have seen it. I'm going to repost it here for your benefit, nevertheless. This is what I framed for you 2 weeks ago, and this is the question I want you to answer. Watch and listen carefully, and make sure you understand the question before you start letting your brain drip on your good whacking hand. Kent, you're always bitching and moaning about people bringing up more than one topic at a time, so I trust you'll notice, acknowledge, and appreciate the fact that all I'm asking you is a single question. You won't need to focus on anything other than that single question, and I'm in fact going to ask you to stay within its guardrails. We're going to keep it clean, just like you've claimed to want it. The thing is, my question isn't a ludicrous, simple-minded one-liner gotcha like, do you believe you came from a rock? It's a serious question, and serious questions always require some explanation. I'm going to start with the explanation. You know what koalas are, right? I want to read you a little about them from the Wikipedia article. The koala, or inaccurately koala bear, Phascolarctos cinereus, is an arboreal herbivorous marsupial native to Australia. I'll skip a bit of technical detail that includes mention of their apparently having evolved into several subspecies and go on to the second paragraph. Koalas typically inhabit open eucalyptus woodland, as the leaves of these trees make up most of their diet. Because this eucalypt diet has limited nutritional and caloric content, koalas are largely sedentary and sleep up to 20 hours a day. They are asocial animals, and bonding exists only between mothers and dependent offspring. And skipping a bit about the males, which is irrelevant to my question. Being marsupials, koalas give birth to underdeveloped young that crawl into their mother's pouches, where they stay for the first 6 to 7 months of their lives. These young koalas, known as joeys, are fully weaned around a year old. Skipping a bit more and going on into paragraph 3, koalas were hunted by indigenous Australians and depicted in myths and cave art for millennia. My question to you, Dr. Dino, or would you prefer that I persist in addressing you as boy, it takes the form of questions I often frame for the exams my students take, that of an essay. I will ask you to describe to your own satisfaction, without invoking miracles, how a breeding pair of koalas on Noah's Ark, animals of the sort you've just heard described, managed to populate or repopulate, whichever you prefer, large parts of the island continent Australia, where they have been hunted for thousands of years by Aboriginal Australians, also presumably the offspring of passengers on Noah's Ark, during the 4,400 years since the flood described in the Bible. Since all of these details are important, I'm going to hold you to account for every single one of them. And you will too if you are capable of understanding the nature and intent of the challenge and rising to it, and God forbid, maybe even benefiting from it. The answer to this question will consist of a complete scenario of migration from Turkey to isolated Australia. The distance from Mount Ararat in Turkey to Colombo, Sri Lanka is about 3,300 miles, assuming foot travel along the coasts of Pakistan and India, and includes vast stretches of arid land which in any event would have been wiped completely clean of all vegetation after a year of total submersion in water. You'll also need to get them from the Indian subcontinent to Sri Lanka. Now let's think about the Trans-Oceanic distance from Colombo to Darwin, Australia, a reasonable path for migrating koalas to take if you'll bother to look at a globe like the one you condescendingly trotted out for my edification. That's about 3,750 miles. Of course, it does include island hopping in the Indonesian archipelago, so there's that. You may include that in your scenario if you like. In your framing of this altogether realistic scenario, be sure to take the following details into account. Koalas eat mostly eucalyptus. They are sedentary, sleeping up to 20 hours per day. Their young are incapable of caring for themselves for about a year after they're born. Since arriving in Australia, they have evolved into several distinctive subspecies which have been hunted by Aboriginal Australians for thousands of years. You're going to have to explain how they managed to find the one food they can eat on a planet that had been completely denuded of vegetation after a year's flood. Are you picturing the magnitude of this challenge? You're going to have to take into account the fact that they can't possibly travel more than about a mile a day at most, owing to one of the most sedentary lifestyles on Earth. You're going to have to account for the extreme dependence of their young and the constraints that places on the migrating island-hopping mother. You're going to have to get them across vast stretches of parched desert and open water somehow without invoking the miraculous or the downright impossible. Unless you have addressed every one of these details, you have not answered the question or even given it a moment's honest consideration. There you have it. The ball's in your court, Kent. Just one question, that's all I've asked. If I may quote you, don't bring up more than one topic at a time. All I'm asking you to address is this one topic in as thorough detail as you lard it into those silly creation seminar videos that you're always hawking for $50. I believe I've circumscribed its outer limits pretty clearly. Stay within the guardrails, Dr. Hovind.